My name is Amora. I am 31. At my daughter's birthday party, the air smelled like vanilla frosting and plastic balloons, and everyone kept smiling the kind of smiles that don't reach the eyes, the kind you wear when you're surrounded by people who already decided what you are worth. Because this was the afternoon my in-laws finally said it out loud, the words they'd been feeding me in pieces for years. The moment my mother-in-law leaned close enough for her breath to graze my ear and hissed, "You're just a leech," as if my existence were a stain on the tablecloth. And I felt my chest tighten, but I didn't cry because crying was exactly what they expected. And I had learned that tears were a currency they loved to spend. The party was supposed to be about my daughter, her laughter bouncing off the walls, her small hands sticky with cake, her eyes lighting up when the candles flared. But every time I looked toward the long table of relatives, I could feel judgment crawling over my skin, measuring me, weighing me, deciding I came up short. They'd always said I was lucky to have married into their family, lucky to be tolerated, lucky to be fed, lucky to be allowed to exist near them. And when I poured myself a drink to calm my shaking hands, I didn't notice my mother-in-law watching me the way a hawk watches a field mouse. Didn't notice my sister-in-law's lips curl into a thin, satisfied smile. I was laughing with a neighbor when I turned back and saw it clearly. Unmistakably, the small practiced movement of fingers, the quick tilt of a wrist, the soft tap as something pale slipped into my glass, and suddenly the words on every revenge story I'd ever heard roared alive in my head. At my daughter's birthday party, I saw my mother-in-law slip powder into my drink, so I stood up, smiling, and handed the glass to my evil sister-in-law. She drank what was meant for me, except this wasn't a headline. It was my life, my daughter's party. My breath caught in my throat as I realized how far they were willing to go to remind me of my place. I didn't scream, didn't call anyone out, because fear sharpened my focus instead of dulling it, and I watched my mother-in-law's eyes flick toward me, daring me to react, daring me to make a scene so she could call me dramatic, unstable, ungrateful, the same labels she'd always slapped on me when I defended myself. The memory of her whispering leech still burned, and suddenly every insult lined up neatly in my mind. Every time they said I was living off their son, every time they counted what they gave me and ignored what I gave back. The nights I stayed up with a sick child while they slept, the meals I cooked, the smiles I forced. My sister-in-law laughed too loudly at a joke someone else told, pretending not to notice my gaze, pretending innocence while standing so close to my drink. Her elbow brushed the table, and I realized then that this wasn't just cruelty, it was entitlement, the belief that they could do whatever they wanted to me and I would swallow it, literally and figuratively. My hands steadied as if something inside me had clicked into place, a calm that scared me more than panic ever had, and I wrapped my fingers around the glass, feeling its cold against my palm, thinking about my daughter's face, about what it would mean if I drank it, about how small moments like this shape a child's future without anyone noticing. I stood up slowly, the room quieting just a fraction as chairs scraped and conversations dipped, and I smiled, the kind of smile that feels like armor, the kind you wear when you decide you're done begging for mercy. And I walked toward my sister-in-law, my heart pounding but my step steady, the green banner in my mind flashing true story, because this was real and it was happening and there was no undo button. I held out the glass and said something light, something harmless, something no one could accuse me of twisting later, my voice even as I offered it to her, watching confusion flicker across her face, watching my mother-in-law stiffen, watching the calculation race behind their eyes as they realized I wasn't playing the role they'd written for me. The room held its breath as the glass changed hands, and in that suspended second, I understood that everything after this would be different. That the party, the insults, the whispered leech, the powder meant for me, all of it was about to collide, and whether they knew it or not, they had just handed me the truth about who they were and who I would no longer allow myself to be. My sister-in-law took the glass with a laugh that was just a little too sharp, raised it like it was nothing, and drank, and the room exhaled as if the moment had passed. But I stood there watching, counting seconds in my head while my mother-in-law's face drained of color, because she knew exactly what had been meant for me, exactly what line had just been crossed. And for the first time since I married into that family, the power shifted so quietly most people didn't even notice. At first, nothing happened, and my sister-in-law smirked, clearly thinking she'd won, clearly thinking I'd tried and failed to embarrass her. But then her smile wobbled, just a little, the way a mask slips when it's been worn too long. She pressed a hand to her stomach, laughed it off, took another sip of water, and my mother-in-law rushed to her side too fast. Too eager, asking if she was okay, drawing attention where none had been before. That was when people started to look, really look, the way relatives do when gossip smells fresh. My daughter tugged at my dress, asking for another slice of cake, and I knelt to her level, smoothing her hair, keeping my voice calm, because no matter what happened next, this day was still hers, and I refused to let their poison touch her memories. Behind me, chairs scraped, whispers spread, and my sister-in-law's laughter turned brittle, then thin, then stopped altogether as nausea washed over her face, and suddenly the room that had always felt stacked against me felt unbalanced in my favor. Someone suggested she sit down. Someone else asked what she'd eaten, and my mother-in-law's eyes burned holes into my back. A silent scream of accusation and fear, but she couldn't say anything without revealing everything. I remembered her breath in my ear, the hissed insult, "You're just a leech," and I realized how desperate those words had been, how badly she needed me to believe them, because if I ever stopped believing them, she lost control. My sister-in-law ended up in the bathroom, vomiting humiliated while guests pretended not to notice. And when an aunt asked me quietly if everything was all right, I met her gaze and said yes, my voice steady because the truth was, for the first time in years, I was more than all right. The party limped on. Cake half eaten, music too loud, tension thick enough to taste, and I watched my in-laws move around me like strangers. Careful now, guarded, unsure of what I might do next, unsure of how much I knew. When it was time to open gifts, my mother-in-law avoided my eyes. My sister-in-law stayed hidden, and I helped my daughter tear wrapping paper, cheering loudly, laughing genuinely, because joy is a kind of revenge too, one they can't argue with or twist. Later, when guests began to leave and the house emptied out, my husband finally asked what had happened, his voice low, his face pale, and I told him everything, every whisper, every look, every insult, the powder, the glass, the truth I'd been swallowing for years, and I watched something in him break and rebuild at the same time. He didn't defend them, didn't minimize it, didn't tell me to keep the peace, and that alone felt like a victory bigger than any confrontation could have been. That night, after my daughter fell asleep clutching a new toy, I sat alone in the quiet and replayed the moment over and over. The choice I made, the calm that surprised even me, and I understood that what was meant for me wasn't just poison in a glass. It was a lifetime of humiliation, of being made small, of being told I was nothing without them. But what they handed me instead was clarity. I stopped answering their calls. I stopped attending their dinners. I stopped explaining myself to people who never listened. The word leech lost its sting when I saw how desperately they needed me beneath them to feel tall. Months later, I heard they told the story differently, that I'd embarrassed them, that I was manipulative, dramatic, dangerous even. But for the first time, I didn't care about the version of me they told the world, because I finally knew my own. At my daughter's birthday party, I saw my mother-in-law slip powder into my drink, so I stood up, smiling and handed the glass to my evil sister-in-law. She drank what was meant for me. That moment didn't just change one afternoon. It changed the rest of my life.